Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful August the 23rd, 2019. Ground of Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, it's a beautiful Friday, and who would have ever thought that getting to Friday you'll be talking about the beginning of the year on that date. And tomorrow is actually the beginning of the year, Charlton, because football kicks off for real tomorrow with college football opening up its 150th season, Charlton.
You kind of threw me for a second, Big C. I thought I slept through the last half of 2019 when you said beginning of the year, but I understand there's football calendars and there's regular calendars, and we love the football calendar. There's so much happening in sports. The football universe is happy for college football. It's amazing. You can have good and bad relationships in your home life. You can have good and bad relationships in your work life. But there's something about football that has always made me as a young boy feel great. Big C, I know you feel the same way too. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. So, Big C, I know you say the start of the New Year's tomorrow, but I've been salivating, wondering how that, is it marinating again or sauteing? I think it's marinating meat for, 48 hours, Big C, your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, Charlton, it's ready. You know, it goes on the grill at sunup. You know, and as the neighbors are waking up and thinking there's a forest fire going on, that smoker is bellowing it out. And that meat, when it's ready to come off the grill, Charlton got some side dishes to go along with that, some barbecue baked beans, some potato salad,
oh my goodness,
some Michelob Ultra Light. Yeah. You know, I mean, we're going to have a great time.
Do you offer food to your neighbors, or do they invite themselves over, Big C, your thoughts?
You know, it's almost like a migration trail, you know, on Saturday, Charlton, in my place. All of a sudden, everybody wants to talk to you. But they only want to talk to you while out there lifting up the lid on the smoker, Charlton. Hey, oh, man, that looks good. I bet that's tasty. You know, they have all those little acronyms that say, give me a taste.
Yeah, it's like the migration when Tiger Woods won the tournament down in Georgia last year. That's what it looks like at Big C's barbecue. The whole neighborhood comes over. It is all good. I love college football. And when you think about it, Big C, college football is a young man's game, and we'll talk about that. But I want to just make sure that I pay homage to our military veterans. And I even want to say that POTUS did a good thing. He said he's going to wipe out all the debt of disabled veterans. Maybe he's trying to beat, you know, some other candidates to the punch with that. Maybe Bernie Sanders. But maybe he should do that for all college kids. That would be great. There's a national suicide hotline number for a lot of veterans or anybody else going through trouble. You can simply dial 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. A lot of teenagers, they text now, Big C. They don't call anymore, but they can still text 838-255. That's 83825 and get some help. Big C, college football is a young man's game. There's been 4 quarterbacks who have appeared in the BCS national title game as true freshmen, and they are all active. Jalen Hurts, Alabama, went from 2016 to 17. There was Jake Fromm at Georgia 2017-18. Trevor Lawrence, Clemson 2018 and 19. And then Tua from Alabama 2017-2018. Which one do you like, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you think of all those guys, they're still on the top of the leaderboard as far as the potential of getting back to those national championship games. You think about Jalen Hurts, Charlton, he spent 3 years going to that game while he was at Alabama.
Yeah.
So he's right at home now that he's at the University of Oklahoma. Will he be able to duplicate that? Now, Oklahoma also made it to the playoff series 2 consecutive years, Charlton, under different quarterbacks, and he'll be the 3rd quarterback out there.
Yeah.
Last year, Trevor Lawrence got there as a true freshman and won it all, Charlton. And so it's going to be very interesting when you think about it. You got Tua, who is returning, who helped Alabama win that national championship just 2 years ago, Charlton, while he took over at halftime for Jalen Hurts. And so when we think about the wealth of quarterbacks, Jacob Fromm has gotten there, and he was beaten by Tua in that overtime game by Alabama. So when you talk about the experience of quarterbacks and wonder why some programs are better than others, you have these young men that have come there, Charlton. The stage is not too big for them.
No.
I know everybody in the media is loving what Trevor Lawrence is doing, but they lost so many players at Clemson that they have to reload.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been there the past couple of years. You think about the 3-year run that they've had, as well as Alabama getting to the national championship game. But he also has to deal with Tua.
Yeah.
But also Tua has to deal with Jacob Fromm at Georgia. They're nipping at the heels of Alabama for supremacy in the SEC.
Yeah, there's a lot of good football players out there. And when you talk about the names and you talk about experience, and experience counts for a lot of people, no matter what you're doing in life, experience helps. I just want to get your thoughts on what happened with Jalen Hurts going from being everybody's All-American, everybody's first round draft pick, until he got placed on the sideline and Tua came in that championship game and got hot. You know, Hurts is still the same guy, so how did it change so much, Big C? He did everything that the Tide needed for the whole year, and he set him on the sideline just for a half, and things have been different for him, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you got to look at how the players respond to certain players on teams, Charlton. I was in that situation one time as a player where we had a starting quarterback.
Yeah.
We also had a backup quarterback that the team responded to better when he came into the game. And as a man, we talked to the head coaches, look, this is the direction we need to go in as a team.
Yeah.
He motivates us. He inspires us. I know a lot of people get tied into a guy because of his win-loss record.
Exactly.
But it's about whether you can lead men. That's what sports is all about. I don't care whether you're in Pop Warner, whether you're in high school, whether you're in college, whether you're in professional ball.
Yes.
It's about, do your teammates believe in you? Are they willing to go to war for you, literally? And that's what sports is all about.
Yeah.
And in those situations where we made the change, Charlton, we went on and excelled as an organization.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that Alabama did. I mean, the head coach has the ultimate decision in changing players. Dabo Swinney did the same thing, Charlton. You think about it, in back-to-back years, Nick Saban made a change at halftime, brought him a national championship for Alabama. Dabo Swinney made the same move a year later after Game 4, where he replaced Kelly Bryant with Trevor Lawrence.
That's right.
It brought him a national championship, Jonathan. These are not the first quarterbacks that have been replaced during the year in college football. When you think about when Ohio State won the initial BCS championship, who was the starting quarterback? Cordell Stewart, Jonathan, and he was third on the depth chart.
Yeah.
But Urban Meyer felt something about Cordell Stewart, and he instilled him as the starter when they got to the playoff series, and he played his hand properly, and they won a national championship. So coaches have to be a lot like poker players.
Yeah.
You got to bluff sometime, and even when you got the hand, you got to slow play it.
Yeah.
But you have to feel the pulse of the team, and players will come to you because they're that mature now as players. They will come to you and say, Coach, we feel better to a man that if we had this situation, that it gives us the best chance to win overall.
You take me back to 1991, the University of Washington Huskies under the great Donnie James. Mark Brunell went on to NFL success, but he injured his knee as a junior. And then they had, I think his name was Billy Joe Hobart out of Puyallup, Washington, and he came in and just let the world on fire and took Washington to a national championship. But they kind of shared time in the backfield, but we know all that's fair in love and war. So we're going to get more into what's happening in the world of college football. And I know you're salivating because those ribs are probably done. College football officially begins tomorrow night in Orlando, Florida, of all places. The SEC, as you mentioned earlier, with Florida, and the ACC, as you mentioned, with Miami. One of these teams, unfortunately, will be automatically eliminated from the college football playoffs unless they lose and run the table, Big C. Would you agree with that? Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think you can lose and run the table early in the season. And, you know, that old adage, well, it's better to lose early.
Yeah.
No, it's better to not lose at all. You want to be realistic about getting into the bowl series. Because you got to understand this. There are conference championships in both of those conferences, Charlton, the ACC and the SEC.
Yeah.
So if you lose early and you don't make the conference championship game, Charlton, the conference championship winner could potentially be an automatic bid for the Bowl Championship Series.
Yeah.
So you have to have just some astonishing record to get in, even when you lose early in the season, because there's going to be 3 or 4 teams that go undefeated throughout the season, and then you're still always going to have a cry from a conference who does not get a team in. Last year, the Pac-12 didn't get a team in. Last year, the Big Ten did not get a team in. So you had conferences that were not represented. So to have a loss early or to have a loss at any point, and Oklahoma, when you think about that, Ohio State had 1 loss. They didn't make it in. They were crying.
That's right.
Georgia was crying because they said they held Alabama in check, for 58 minutes, but they still lost.
Right.
So it's not good to lose at any time. You want to run the table.
Yeah, it definitely helps running the table. Now, this always talks about who's number 1, who's number 2. So we can say the top 4 or 5 teams, everybody is talking about Alabama and Clemson. And then the second row of teams might be Georgia, and it might be Ohio State. A lot of people think Oregon's ranked too low. We'll find out when they play Auburn. But I want to have a little bit of twist today. I know this feeling, you know how we say relationships can be good and bad. Sometimes you go through good stuff, you go through bad stuff, like a roller coaster, Big C. But when you think of some of the best college football environments and the crazy crowds that are around, and what makes you feel good just walking onto the stadium parking lot like Big C's Barbecue. Big C's Barbecue, for anyone who wants to know, remember Tiger Woods when he won down in Georgia last year, and the crowd was like, Jesus, part the river. That's how good the barbecue is. But I want to get Big C's thoughts on the best places to watch a college football game because of the team being good, also because of the cheerleaders, and because of the crowd, the tailgating, all that good stuff. Give me your thoughts if you think Florida State University, with their Native American chant, which may be offensive to some, but I think it's an appreciation by some also. Give me your feeling on Florida State. Is that one of the most enjoyable places to watch a football game, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charleston, I think a big part of enjoying college football is about winning.
Yeah.
That's what you have to look at. If you don't have a winning environment, then you don't have a lot going on outside the stadium. And where college football has gotten to nowadays is that you have at least 50% of the fans outside the stadium, even when you have a packed house, because you have these massive RVs down here in the southeast, Charleston, and everybody goes to the game with. You're sitting outside the stadium, people are popping up these 65, 75-inch screens on the side of their RV. It's more comfortable to sit outside the stadium because you have all the amenities that you need. You don't have to stand in that long line for the restroom. You don't have to worry about them shutting off the beer in the third quarter, Charleston. You have all of what you want to need. But down in Florida, I mean, it's hot, it's humid. It's been fun. I mean, when Bobby Bowden was running the house down there, Charleston, it was a great place to be, that environment in the pregame for football.
Let me take you up north, and I love what you said about the South and the tailgating, and people have TVs bigger than cars sometime outside watching the game outside of the stadium. This feeling of Big Ten football when you go up north and you have Michigan with the Big Blue, the 100,000+ fans, their colors, the fight song, it's a history. The Big Bowl doesn't look like it's a tall stadium, but it's very deep. The feeling for Michigan football, their passion runs deep, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about the maize and blue, Charleston, you're looking at an alumni base that's, worldwide and countrywide here in the U.S. I think that's the biggest part. When you have such an enrollment and student body at your university, and those people come back. That's a big part of Big Ten football, is that the alumni come back to the games, Charleston. The boosters are there at the games. These are traditional universities. When you talk about the South and you talk about up there in the Northwest, Charleston, the Midwest, when you're talking about the Big Ten country, you think about those universities and the stadiums that are in those universities. One of the things that had happened in the last decade, Charleston, is that schools in the Big Ten, schools in the SEC, and all throughout the South, they've expanded their stadiums, because their following has been there. The fans want to be a part of those great traditions. It's a lifeline in the South and up in the Big Ten, Charleston. When you go there, you go to a game, it is a festival. People show up the day before in the parking lots and get everything going. They don't show up, an hour before the game. They're there the day before. They have reserved parking spots. If you look at a lot of the stadiums in the Big Ten and in the SEC and the ACC, you always see these seats that are still there that are different colors, that normally the team's color, that is sitting there. because these fans leave their chairs with the backs there on those bleacher seats.
Yeah.
Because they know they're going to be there for every game, and they're safe. No one's going to take them, Charlton.
Yeah.
Because that's how traditionalist they are, and how loyal these fan bases are, and how respectable they are of each other.
When you think of more, and that's beautiful that people actually spend the night outside just because of college football, not because they're trying to get in a church, not because they're trying to beat the crowd for the holidays, but something about football does that. Notre Dame, I think one of the most iconic signs from Notre Dame football, and it goes back to New Rockne, it goes back to Eric Parseghian, of course the last coach to win the national championship, the great Lou Holtz. But they have a sign as you leave the tunnel called Play Like a Champion. I've seen the expansion of Notre Dame Stadium. I've mostly watched them because they would always play USC every year, and there was something about Touchdown Jesus, even though they need to change this color of Touchdown Jesus. But the feeling at Notre Dame football is like you're really at an event more than a game. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that moniker, Play Like a Champion thing, I think that's a motto for every program. They may not put it on a billboard,
right,
but you're told that by every coach that you deal with. When you think about the rich tradition of Notre Dame football, Charlton, it's the legacy of college football that they've been around that long, and they've been that significant. They've always been an independent. They've been able to go out nationwide and get some of the best players in the country, Charlton, to keep that strong tradition there at that great university. But to play like a champion is how you're taught, you know, from the coaching staff, the tradition of a university. And that's the reason why you see the same universities on top year in and year out. They don't have these doldrums where they go on 2 and 3 years and they're struggling and people say, well, they're in a rebuilding process. College football is in a rebuilding process every year. It's about having the personnel in the front office to get those personnel on the field to perform at that level of championship play.
And think of a team that does that for the Midwest. When I think of championship teams, I think of Ohio State, how they dot the I with their band, their crowd noise. They've also filled in the horseshoe over the probably last decade. That holds over 100,000+ also. People still think about Woody Hayes as the guy. Now, Urban Meyer, of course, but he's gone. And now they have a new general in town. But there's something about Ohio State, just like Notre Dame and Michigan and other programs, they can recruit all over the country. But they've managed to be, I would say, maybe even more popular than their NFL team, the Cleveland Browns. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they are. Ohio State dominates that state, Charlton, as far as football. There's a plethora of college teams there in the state of Ohio. But Ohio State is that signature team that everybody identifies with when you go to the state of Ohio and you're thinking about college football. But, you know, winning creates that. And when you talk about those programs that you've mentioned thus far, Charlton, they all have that tremendous legacy of winning. And that's what players, when you go out to recruit, want to be a part of. And also a big part of the Big Ten, the SEC and ACC, Charlton, is the recruiting budget. These people, when you talk about recruiting budgets, Charlton, they put their money where their mouth is. They leave no expense unturned when it comes out to going out getting the best players in the country, Charlton. They will go all over. They'll go to California. They'll go to Alaska. They'll go to New York. They'll go to Florida. They'll go to Texas. They want to find the best athletes out there, Charlton, because this is the demand of the student bodies and the boosters. Also just the program to stay on top. You can't skimp in college football financially if you want to win. And none of those programs have. You always see them in major bowl games, Charlton. That's because they're winning. That attracts the best players in the country because you are a winner.
Let me talk about winning. When you go down to Texas, and I know we talk about championship games, you would have thought that Texas would have, since Mack Brown at least won another championship, but they haven't. That's the biggest program as far as identity in Texas. And Texas has so many colleges, from Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, TCU. I mean, Baylor, they have so many. But it's that burnt orange and the history of players that really puts Texas on the map again. Texas is a team that's always expected to compete for a national championship. And if you're from Texas, no matter how bad they are, they're still Texas. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, you think about Texas and competing. This is a team that, you know, is allocated adding another 15 to 20,000 seats to their already 102,000 seat stadium.
That's right.
So they got to go up well to 120,000 seats there at their field
in Austin.
They're on campus, Charlton. So when you talk about investing in a program, this is what they want. The good teams get better because they invest. Where do the young players want to go play college football, Charlton? They want to go play in front of massive crowds. You know, we've talked about the West Coast, how they have not been able to keep pace with the Northeast, the Southeast, the Southwest, Charlton, because they don't have the stadium infrastructure that these schools have. We saw just a few weeks ago where LSU opened up a new expansion for the stadium, you know, just for the players in the locker rooms, where they spent $28 million.
$28 million,
You got to think about what Clemson spent 2 years ago. Clemson 2 years ago spent $53 million on upgrading their facilities for the players, just for the players. All the things that they added in, bowling alleys, the new locker room, a miniature golf course, a 9-hole golf course for the players. All of the things that you're going to get at a theme park, they added in. You know, video arcade rooms, you know, the swimming pools, all of these things just for the players. This is what attracts players to the great programs that we see week in, week out. When you're talking about the top 10 in the country, top 15 in the country, you have to look at the investment that they make in the players. The West Coast is well behind what the rest of the country is doing. Matter of fact, they've downsized in a lot of their stadiums where they're expanding elsewhere, and that's what attracts the best young athletes now.
Let me get your thoughts, because when you think West Coast football, you think USC and maybe UCLA, even though Oregon has taken over as a team that a lot of people want to be like now, because Oregon has 19,000 different uniforms, Big C, so the players, they have something to look forward to more than just what happens on a Saturday. But there's something about the Coliseum in Southern California, knowing they've had Olympics there. They used to play baseball in the LA Coliseum. They've had professional football teams in the Coliseum, Olympics, so many movie stars that go to games, and it's in the heart of South Central Los Angeles, which is a hotbed of high school football. And they've had many national championships and All-Americans over the years, and many of the players from USC have outnumbered other schools that have gone on and played pro. But there's something about that white horse that runs around the track when they score a touchdown. And just like Alabama was down when USC was up, there's always, the tide is always changing. Give me your view from a guy from the South that sees 100,000 seat stadiums. You see people that tell good overnight. USC used to have that atmosphere, but you're not sleeping outside the Coliseum. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you got to think about West Coast football. Realistically, Charlton, it's insignificant without SC being relevant.
I agree.
USC has not been relevant in a long time, and so that's the moniker of the West Coast. Regardless of how well Oregon may play at times, how well Washington may play at times, Charlton, they are not the signature programs of the West Coast. When you think about West Coast football, for the past 5 decades, it's been about USC. They've always been on the national stage. They've had a tremendous amount of athletes that have gone on to the next level. I mean, all the major programs have. But USC has fallen on hard times. Why, Charlton? Because they don't compete like those other programs. They don't have the expensive bigs like you have at LSU, like you have at Alabama, like you have at Clemson. They're not making that type of investment like Texas A&M did to upgrade their stadium. You think about, you talked about the Coliseums and all the events that have occurred in the Coliseum. We're talking about an arena that was built back in the 1920s, 1930s.
That's right.
So it's not updated to keep up with the modern standard of some of these luscious stadiums that you see around the country and the expansion that they do on them that are friendly to the players. That's what you have to do. So when these kids think about going to a school, USC doesn't play on campus. UCLA does not play on campus. Washington and Oregon, they play on campus, Charlton, but those are smaller stadiums. But when you look at some of these massive structures in the South, Southeast, and up in the Midwest, Charlton, and they're on campus. So the players get a chance to interact at the facility where they're going to be playing. That's very attractive to players nowadays, not to have to get on a bus to ride to the stadium for the game.
I agree, and that's what happened down at UCLA. It's just too far to go from Westwood over to Pasadena to play a football game. And if we keep it on the West Coast, even Arizona State, they used to host the Super Bowls down at Tempe Stadium. They've taken the crowd from, I think, 77,000 down to 56,000. You got to go to the Rose Bowl, where it's not the same unless they have the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all, in that game. Maybe Chip Kelly down in the heartbed of LA can do some better recruiting. But on the West Coast, you're right. You got to go north up I-5 to Oregon at Austin Stadium, and that stadium holds less than 60,000. But the way it's constructed, it sounds like they have 90,000 in there. Plus, they have several types of uniforms. that brings the crowd too, and it's a small town environment. Also, Husky Stadium up in Seattle, Washington, with the overhangs on the sidelines, that brings about 72,000. But the people are on top of you, and that's an exciting place to play. And that's carried the weight for the Pac-12. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it does, but like I said, you know, until USC becomes relevant, West Coast football will be irrelevant. You think about when they're talking about Washington. Washington pulled no weight when it comes to being on a national scale. That's the game they had last year. I believe they lost to Auburn early in the season, Charlton. It didn't move the needle as far as attraction on a national scale. People really didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And even Oregon, you know, there's been a lot of thought of Oregon getting to the next level, but they constantly disappoint. They lose games to people, Charlton, that they should blow out. They have games in hand. Next thing you know, in the fourth quarter, they relax. They don't know how to close. And so I think the Pac-12 hurts itself on a national scale because they don't play a dominant brand of football.
I think you're right. They got to start winning. I think it sets the tone if Oregon can knock off Auburn this year. I want to go down south your neck of the woods. The University of Georgia and the pageantry and all the great players, they don't have the national championships that an Alabama has, but they do have that great stadium out there that's not that far from Atlanta. But they have the southern feel that when you're in the state of Georgia, they draw better than Georgia Tech. But they become, I would think, the second or third best team in the SEC over the past 5 years. Give me your feeling on why Georgia football is such an iconic place to go watch a football game. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, you go down between the hedges in Athens, Georgia, Charlton, and as a matter of fact, that's another one of those stadiums that they're getting ready to do a stadium expansion on.
Wow.
Mississippi State expanded. Missouri just expanded this past season, Charlton. This is a wave going through the SEC because fans enjoyed the games down in the South. And Georgia, I mean, Kirby Smart has gone down there and revitalized Georgia football just as Vince Dooley did back in the 80s when he won a national championship with Herschel Walker running the football for him. Kirby Smart has been in the national championship game, Charlton, in the last 3 years with the University of Georgia. They thought they would get in there last year. They've been in the playoffs 2 of those 3 years. So here's a coach that has revitalized the fan base. He has one of the top recruiting classes in the country, and that's what keeps you up there. Is that when you can be a top 3 recruiting class every year, that's what Kirby Smart has had the last 3 years, a top 3 recruiting class nationally. That means he's going out getting the best players at every position. And you think about this. Kirby Smart has 3 quarterbacks that he recruited starting this year in Power 5 conferences. Justin Fields will be starting at Ohio State University. Jacob Eason will be starting at the University of Washington, and Jake Fromm will be starting there at the University of Georgia. He recruited all 3 of those quarterbacks over the last 3 years. So when you talk about a coach getting it done, that will create excitement in your program.
That's amazing. I know if you go down to Knoxville, you see the University of Tennessee. I believe they hold over 107,000 or maybe even more than that. And so they haven't won national championships the way that they could with that type of following. But I want to get your thoughts on some of the people that I've talked to from the West Coast that have gone down south and played. I want to cover just a few more teams before we get into a few more sports. I look at LSU, and there's something about that old, it looks like an old rustic stadium, kind of like the Coliseum in Los Angeles. And there's something about the magic that happens in Baton Rouge when they play the games at nighttime that you don't feel in the daytime. Give me the feeling on what it is. They don't have the biggest stadium, but as magic happens down there, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it might not be the biggest stadium, but it actually holds 102,000.
Really?
It may not seem big. 102,000 people you can get into Death Valley down at LSU. So it is a magnificent sight, and if you ever want to see a nighttime college football game, Charlton, that is the place to go and watch a nighttime football game. It is a cocktail party waiting to happen. It is a barbecue waiting to happen, but it is a festival. And that's what's great about Southern college football is that it's a tradition like none other. And people take it seriously, Charlton. They pass it down from generation to generation. You see great-grandparents, you see grandparents, you see parents, you see kids. You see it all out there, Charlton. That's what makes Southern football so great. And when you talk about Death Valley down there at LSU, it is a tremendous setting. And you think about the SEC in total, Charlton. This is a conference that will have 6 stadiums. in the next 2 years that all seat over 100,000 people.
Wow, that's incredible. I think the Pac-12 can take notice, but you got to have the desire, because a lot of those stadiums, they're in smaller cities. A lot of the Pac-12 schools, they're in major metropolitan areas, and people do other things. I want to just keep it down south, because the last couple of years, Clemson is just, they've replaced Florida State and Miami as that team in the ACC that people pay attention to. I know when Donovan McNabb was playing, it was always about Syracuse. Then when Tiki Barber played, it was about Virginia. Or Michael Vick, it was about Virginia Tech. But now it's all Clemson. There's something about touching the rock at Clemson down in Death Valley. And Dabo's been able to come out to California and get some of the top recruits out of California to go 3,000 miles away and play a game. Mix of your thoughts.
Well, that's because you win, Charlton. You win, you can get the recruits. When USC was a national power, Charlton, they recruited nationally.
Yeah.
They had players from New Jersey. They had players from Pennsylvania, Texas, Florida, all over the country, Washington, everywhere. They came. They got the elite. Minnesota. Yeah. If you look at some of their rosters from the 70s and 80s, Charlton, they were a nationally recruiting ball club. Lynn Swann was out of, Pennsylvania. You think about that. So they went all the way across the country and got the elite players.
Yeah.
That's what Clemson is able to do now, Charlton. When you look at the rise of this program over the last 5 years under Dabo Swinney, they've been a consistent winner. They've been a perennial powerhouse. They've been a gateway to the NFL.
Yeah.
Players see that, Charlton. You don't even have to be a starter to get an opportunity to be in the NFL because they understand the depth of the program.
Yeah.
Just like Miami, where we talked about that, Larry Goga had 38 players drafted off a national championship team in 2011.
Wow.
That's how good, in 2001, that's how good that program was.
Yeah.
They had so many excellent players on the roster. But it's also about, Charlton, having the facilities.
Yeah.
When you talk about those West Coast teams, and you look at what really were the two flagships out there, USC and UCLA, they do not have on-campus facilities.
No.
They don't have on-campus stadiums. So it's hard for the student body to get to the game. That's going to take away from a lot of your crowd base.
Yeah.
The players are not working out at the stadium. They got to work out at a practice facility on campus with a tarp around the field. So they don't get the feel of being part of a program any longer. Players now are more prescient to have things for themselves. They're not worried about the university. Universities don't have luster any longer. It's about what the player's going to get out of the experience. And when you go to these schools where they have these huge facilities on campus, they have the athletic dorm right outside the stadium, Charlton. You have that in the Big 12. You have that in the Big 10. You have that in the SEC. You have that in the ACC. That's how those facilities are structured. On the Pac-12 side, Charlton, everybody doesn't have those type of digs. And that's not going to attract the elite athletes.
That's a very well said. We're going to take what's called a Big C timeout. We're going to come back and run down a few more programs. Really excited about what's happening in the world of college football. And there's a lot more things to be excited about in the world of sports and life. We'll talk about it after the Big C pause, and we hope that you'll come back and join us as well. All right, we are back from the Big C Sports Timeout, Big C Pause and Timeout, same thing. We talk about so many schools, especially the ones down south, where I think they've really gotten it right, the athletic budget. Paying athletes aside, we know that should happen, and hopefully it will. I know some schools out here in California that I love and been to their stadiums. I love the University of California, Berkeley. I think Strawberry Canyon is one of the most beautiful places to watch a college football game in the backdrop of the San Francisco Bay Area. Also, if you've ever been over to Pennsylvania at Happy Valley, Penn State, and when they do the whiteout, there's really nothing like that. And I know that program is back on the rise. And then another program down south, you look at Florida, the Gators and Gator territory. I still think they take a back seat to Florida State with the crowd. But there's one more state that I want to touch, and that's in Texas. Because Texas, and then I'm going to finish with Alabama. Texas A&M has not won a national championship, but they are on the verge of just building their program to make that next leap. But if you haven't seen a game at Kyle Field where the 12th man stands, that is actually a better atmosphere than the University of Texas, even though Texas football is more synonymous. Your picks and your thoughts.
Well, you have to grow. They left the Big 12, Charlton. They went to the SEC. And they built their facilities to compete in the SEC.
That's right.
They're just in Texas by name, but they're not in that conference any longer.
Yeah.
And you look at how competitive they've been. You know, they haven't gotten to the national championship playoff series yet, Charlton. But you got to look at who's in their conference every year they have to play. Alabama, you know, LSU, you know, Georgia. These schools of that nature that have that heritage. But they have been building the program. They've expanded the stadium. They've invested in the head coach. They're on the rise.
They're on the rise. Last team I'll finish with. I know a lot of good old boys have to get baptized in some religions. And there's a lot of good that got to get baptized if they're going to play at Alabama, Nick Saban's lake. A lot of players go down there and barbecue and swim in his lake. I think that's where Julio Jones lost his earring. I can't confirm or deny that. But Alabama, they don't have the largest stadium in the SEC. But they have that Alabama-Auburn rival thing with Jordan Hare. I think is about an 80-mile difference with that. But between those two schools, I know that that's such a rivalry. Like Cal and Stanford have that thing going on here. USC, UCLA, Ohio State, and Michigan. Miami and Florida. If you look at what Alabama and Auburn have done over the years, not the biggest population-wise, but they have climbed to the mountaintop of college football dominance. Why, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you look at that stadium in Tuscaloosa, you can squeeze 103,000 people in there. That's the stadium record.
Wow.
103,000 people. So that they get people inside.
Yeah.
The reason why they're what they are, Charlton, is because they make football a part of the community.
Yeah.
The community wants to embrace them. This is the thing when you look at Southern football, Charlton, it is a culture. And when you go west of the Mississippi, Charlton, it's not a culture out there. Well, west of the Rockies.
Yeah.
Let's go there, west of the Rockies.
Yeah.
Football has not become a culture because everybody is all about moving on to do other things about themselves. It's not the rich tradition that it once was, and you wonder how it got lost on the West Coast when you had such great programs out there. But when you look at Alabama, playing in Tuscaloosa, when you play in Auburn, I mean, you're talking about two schools that are 95 miles apart.
Yeah.
When you get on the road, 95 miles apart. One stadium seats 88,000, one other stadium seats 103,000.
Yeah.
So you're 95 miles apart, and you can get together 190,000 people on a Saturday, even if you're playing two home games, to come to your facility and watch. That's an attraction, Charlton. That means you're doing something right, marketing-wise, within the community. You're recruiting locally. And when you look at those programs, you got to look at the number of local players. They get the best players in the state between those two universities.
Yeah.
Everybody else has to go someplace else. But not only that, they're able to go outside the state and get some of the best players outside the state and bring them there also.
That's amazing. And I just love this time of year. I know I'm more of a West Coast guy. You're more of a Southern guy. And I will tip my hat. You good boys have mastered football. You can go to small towns in California, and you'll see some universities, but they've also lost a lot of universities as well. UOP doesn't play football anymore. Pete Carroll, that's his alma mater. There's a lot of great football that used to be played in the Central Valley. University at San Francisco State lost their program. Cal State Hayward, which is now Cal State East Bay, they lost football. Santa Clara lost football, Big C. Cal State Fullerton, they also lost football. Long Beach State lost football. There's a lot of programs where it's gone away, even Chico State, and I want to see it come back. But I want to just pay off.
And that's something that you've never had in the South.
Yeah.
Southern schools have never given up football, Charlton, regardless of the size of the football. I think the University of Alabama, Birmingham lost football a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
People got together and brought it back, Charlton. They funded that program. People got out and raised funds to bring a football program back.
Yeah.
That's how important football is in the South. When a university did, a major university, University of Alabama, Birmingham, it's right there in Birmingham, Alabama, lost football for 2 years. But boosters and alumni, everybody got together and said, hey, we need football because it is a lifeline. You talked about those number of schools in California that lost football,
at least 10
and no one thought
years.
about finding a way to bring it back with all of the money out there in California. In the South, they wouldn't let it go away, Charlton. You know, people were hurt, and they saw how it affected their lives, and they made a conscious effort to bring it back to a university.
Yeah, I love that part about the sports, how it brings people together. It's amazing. I want to just pay homage as we do Big C. We started last year doing Big C's Friday Night Lights. We talked about some of the top programs in college football, and a lot of people, they can't go to the college level because they can't compete. but high school is where a lot of people will play their final high school competition. I want to run down the schedule just for the night's top 10 in the country, and Big C Sports does it because we have young kids that follow our program as well. I want to just bring this up. Number 1, Mater Dei of Santa Ana, California. They're playing number 12, Centennial Corona in Southern California. Mater Dei has been the last 2-time defending national champions. And then you have the number 3 program is actually number 2, St. Francis Academy out of Baltimore, Maryland. They're playing number 9, Miami Central. Number 3, St. John Bosco of Bellflower, California. They're in the same conference as Mater Dei. They're playing number 21, DeMatha of Hyattville, Maryland. Big C, we talked about it before. You know, I said when you were growing up, you said that you guys didn't fly airplanes across the country to play teams, that you got on a school bus and the air conditioner was rolled the window down and hope your guy in front of you didn't have his armpits up. Big C, is that what you said?
Well, Charlton, I look at the landscape of high school football now, and I see a landscape of a lot of unfairness and privilege.
Yeah.
When you look at so many of these schools, these are private schools, Charlton. These are not high schools where you have to take kids out of your district.
Yeah.
These are busing in kids, bringing in kids, Charlton, from all over based on financial ability.
Yeah.
And so it creates a huge disadvantage for a lot of kids when you're going out and you destroy kids mentally and structurally.
Yep.
Because you have so many dominant athletes on your team. These are like prep schools for colleges,
yeah,
what they become. And so I think that, you know, the high school level really needs to look into that. When you can fly across the country,
yep,
where's the money coming from? Because these are private institutions. These are not city-run schools.
That's true. That is very true, Big C. North Shore, Houston, Texas. They will play Katy, Texas next week in their game, and they're at number 4. Number 5, St. John's, Washington, D.C., and they'll start up against Miami Southridge, and that's Saturday. Number 6, IMG Academy. The only game they've lost in the last 4 years was the Mater Dei of Santa Ana last year. They'll play Venice, Florida. Number 7, Duncanville, Texas. They're idle. They open the season August 30 against Lancaster, Texas. Number 8, St. Joseph Prep out of Philadelphia. They'll open the season August 30th against Marietta, Georgia. That's another. How far is Philadelphia from let's say Atlanta? That has to be about 1,500 miles. Those two teams are going to open the season against each other. But the number 1 game in all the country is number 10, St. Thomas Aquinas out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at number 18, Concord de La Salle. And those two programs have participated in multiple national championships. De La Salle has won 5 national championships, and St. Thomas Aquinas has won 3. And they're 2 of the best programs, not only in the state of Florida and California, but again, that's a 3,000-mile flight, Big C, your thought.
Well, like I said, you know, when you got to look at this, what about the local schools that these teams have to play against, the disadvantage that those players have? I mean, high school is about the structure of kids,
yeah,
the development, to get to the next level. And when you walk onto a playing surface, Charlton, and you're sitting there and you're looking across the field at this opposing team, and it looks like a college team.
Yeah.
You know, from the gear that they wear, Charlton, just to the size of the players.
Yeah.
What are you doing as far as the development of the young players that when you go out there and you're losing a game by 60 to 70 points because this team is running up the score on you? I saw a game last year on television of 2 teams out in California, one of those nationally ranked teams.
Oaks Christian
that
Academy.
You talk about it,
yeah,
and they went to a smaller town and played a team because that was the only team that they could get to play them.
Yeah.
They had scored 50-something points by the midway through the second quarter. I turned it off because it was an embarrassment just watching that. So how should those players on the losing side
yep,
think about themselves? You know, it's nice to talk about the top 10 in the country, but what about the schedule of teams that they play when you go out there and you got some defensive linemen on your team that might weigh 200 pounds because those are the kids that are in your school district.
Right.
You got a 145-pound defensive back going against a 6'5", 230-pound tight end. You got that 205-pound defensive tackle going against, you know, a 300-pound offensive tackle.
Yeah.
It's a huge disadvantage mentally and physically. And I understand you're trying to get kids to the next level. You're trying to develop them. I came out of a small high school, and everybody I played with was out of that small town that I lived in.
Yeah.
And all the schools that we played were in that conference, and they were all in small towns.
Yeah.
So we knew we had the same mental and physical advantage and disadvantage against each other, Charlton.
Yeah.
But how do you explain to the kids when you bring in one of these nationally ranked programs, as you talk about, and you bring them into some school in some small town, and say, guys, go out there and compete. There was a movie a couple of years ago called The Blind Side.
I remember that.
It was about this kid, Michael Ward, who went on to play in the NFL and the University of Mississippi.
Yeah.
And he was playing against this defensive lineman who he eventually knocked out of the game. And they brought this little kid in. There was a backup, and he looked about 140 pounds soaking wet. Didn't even know how to get into a stance.
Right.
And he didn't know what to do against Michael.
Yeah.
But, these are the situations that a lot of these kids face, and they're not going to go on and play college football. So how does it affect them mentally in the long run?
Well, I think it's feast or famine, and you called it cunning, where you take the best of the best, and then you strip away that from the remainders of it, and that's what happens in competition. But some people love it, some people don't, but it's a growing trend. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. Big C, I want to just bring up something, because I know everybody's happy about football, and we love football, we love our baseball and basketball, and we love everything. But I want to just bring up something. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. You talk about where that money is coming from. There's a lot of people with a lot of money in California. A gentleman by the name of Michael Harris, Tuesday, August 27th, 2019, in the California State Capitol in Sacramento, room 126, from 1 to 3 o'clock p.m. If you're a person of color, even if you're not, you got to just find out what's going on. You can experience an historic informational hearing. It's focused on expanding the mutually beneficial Pan-African and Caribbean trade. You hear about the trade with China. You got to pay attention to it, guys. Think about, for you biblical people, Genesis 15, 12 through 14. It talks about 400 years. Big C, would you believe that we are 400 years away from August 1619 to this year, and that's when the first enslaved Pan-Africans came from the Kwanzaa River in the Angola region to the King James colony in Virginia. The slave trade began in 1619. It's 400 years ago. I know we're talking about 150 years of college football, but 400 years ago, a lot of these guys you're going to see playing on Saturday and Sunday, it all started with that diaspora, that journey across the Atlantic. And so just something to keep in mind, in 1492, it became well known around the world that the world was actually round. And that began the global conquest by Europeans to enslave people around the world. It became known as the British colonies. So I know a lot of us are focused on football, 150 years, 100 years of the NFL. But keep in mind, for people of color and people that talk about we don't need reparations and Black Lives Matter and people who are tired of NFL athletes taking a kneel, 400 years ago, the first slaves showed up in the United States. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it's a stain on everybody's history, Charlton, that occurred, and still remnants of it still live lively today in society when you think about the oppression of colored people in this country. And we have an administration that's trying to oppress people of color. You would think that the advancement of all people would have eliminated that thought process, but we still live in one of the most racially divided segments of the world.
Yeah, we still do, but we always love bringing that to you. I know a lot of young people listen, but please get an education too. Don't just play sports. Don't let them make you that one single-minded person. I do want to just bring up something that also happened in the NBA. Luke Walton, new head coach of the Sacramento Kings. Remember, Magic Johnson wanted to get rid of him, but then, the organization, the ownership, the Buss family, or as they could say, Jenny Buss, didn't want to get rid of him. Well, he ended up in Sacramento. But he came with a stain on him. It was called a sexual harassment allegations. Well, money buys things. And the charges have been dropped. And there's just part of what happened. No one's talking about the woman. I just hope everything goes forward. But I don't want to be so insensitive that we say the woman had no cause because money can buy you out of allegations. Also, the same Laker organization, I believe they're bringing in Dwight Howard. I don't know if they signed the contract yet, but he's signing a non-guaranteed contract with the Lakers. I think that's a good or bad thing because you talked about signing those one-year deals, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, so many players, as they get to the latter part of their career, Charlton, these are the things that happen. But back to the Luke Walton scenario, Charlton, you have to look at it in a two-sided scenario. Was this a civil suit, Charlton, against him on the allegations, or was this a criminal suit against him on the allegations? And I'm always skeptical when people come after someone in a civil suit versus a criminal suit, Charlton.
Yeah.
Let the law enforcement investigate it. Don't say, well, I'm going to sue this guy on these allegations.
Right.
take it to law enforcement if it has credence.
Yeah, I understand wholeheartedly, Big C. So we got to keep an eye on that too, and everybody else just keep aware of what's going on in your surroundings. I want to jump to the NFL real quick, because the NFL, and I know we talked about the Raiders going up to Canada, and I don't know if you blame the Raiders for tearing up the goalposts and trying to move it back, and it messed up the field, so they ended up playing on 80 yards. They should have taken care of that long before the week they flew up there, Big C, and I know that's a bad look on the NFL to go up there and damage a CFL stadium, but the NFL, with a number of key high-profile players, they've already suffered injuries during the preseason. It's highly unlikely that the NFL would play 4 preseason games next season, and I know they're talking about making 18 regular season games. People can't even get through a preseason without getting hurt, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it's not going to go to 18. It's going to be a 16. Well, no, it is an 18-game schedule.
Yeah.
Or is it a 16?
It's 16
schedule.
now. They want to go
14 now,
18.
don't they? I don't know. I got CTE.
16, all that barbecue smoke, Big League.
Is it 16 or 14 that we're playing now?
16 now. 16 now. And they want to go to 18.
Now.
Yeah.
They're going to have to find some way, Charlton, to eliminate some of these preseason games. When you look at the catastrophic injuries of players who've been lost for at least half the season and some for the entire season.
Yeah.
The NFL, they're talking about safety. They're talking about helmet safety. They're talking about safety of players. And I think what they need to do is go ahead on and increase the schedule. The salary cap is going to go up next year, Charlton, after the collective bargaining agreement. But you can find ways that limit every player on the roster, that no player plays more than 16 regular season games.
Yeah.
You can create that, Charlton. You just inactive a couple players. You bring up a couple players off the practice roster, and you make them active during the regular season.
Yeah.
But this is something that the NFL sternly is going to have to look at. Last night, Carolina quarterback Cam Newton suffered an ankle injury. And so who knows whether he's going to be ready for the start of the season.
Yeah.
We haven't seen Andrew Luck, of the Indianapolis Colts, all preseason long, because of an ankle injury.
Yep.
Multiple players have been lost with broken legs, broken arms, Charlton, and knee injuries already in the preseason. These were starters last year and expected to be starters this year.
Yeah.
So this is something that teams are really taking an in-depth look at, Charlton. What is the risk-reward of the preseason? Everybody comes to training camp in shape now and ready to play, because football is a year-round entity.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was when I first started. You show up at training camp. Training camp would last 6 weeks before you had a preseason game.
Yeah.
That's how long training camp used to be back in the day.
Well,
now you come to training camp, you're there 8 days, you got a preseason game. So they're going to have to take a stern look, and I think the NFL will make that move next year, Charlton, to reduce it down to just 2 preseason games.
Well, they're going to have to do something. You think about the schedule tonight. It's a small schedule. You have Cleveland at Tampa Bay, Buffalo's at Detroit, and those games are already underway. And then Saturday's matchup, you have Arizona at Minnesota, Houston at Dallas, and who knows what's going to happen with Ezekiel Elliott's contract. I think he'll sign. Chicago at Indianapolis, New Orleans at the New York Jets, San Francisco at Kansas City. We talked about it before, and because I'm out here in Northern California, the Bay Area, there's so much talk about Garoppolo, how they're trying to say, hey, forget about what you saw with your own eyes. Just listen to what we tell you. There's still people pretending that 5 interceptions in practice, and then he was only 1 out of 6 with the interception, could have been 2 in the game against Denver. There's something about him. He has that knee was injured, and he has $137 million. He's not going to put it all on the line, even psychologically. He's gun shy, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, knee injuries affect anybody, Charlton. You have to take serious hits to come back from those to understand whether you're structurally sound.
Yeah.
And all players don't have the mentality to do that. Here's a guy who's never really been a bona fide starter in the NFL. He's inherited that position.
Media made.
But he hasn't been able to go out and lead teams. We talked about earlier being the leader of men, having men that believe in you.
Yep.
I think the San Francisco 49er player per man right now believe more in Nick Mullen than what they do in Jimmy Garoppolo.
And their management knows that, but they put so much money. They don't want to look dumb. But people know what they see when they're watching the game, Big C. They had our tight end that went to the Pro Bowl last year. It wasn't because he was catching passes from Garoppolo. Denver at Los Angeles Rams, and the Seattle Seahawks at the Chargers. And then Sunday, Pittsburgh's at Tennessee. So it's all fair in love and war. I want to just touch on a little bit what's happening with the world of baseball, and then we'll close out with golf. I know electronics, and we talk about artificial intelligence, it's all part of sports now. It's all part of how, people do what they do in the world of sports. But I want to get your feeling, because I know you talked about something that I didn't really think much about. When you mentioned what's happening in the world of high school football, and you get into the mind of what do these young kids feel like when schools like Mater Dei can recruit from all over the country, schools like IMG Academy, De La Salle, St. Thomas Aquinas, they recruit from all over the country. Baseball's having the same effect at the high school level, and I think that's why you don't see as many minorities in the game, because a lot of inner city schools, they don't have the money to fly all over the country and bring in top people at Big C. I want to get your thoughts on that before we get on the schedule.
Well, when you think about it, Charlton, and these schools create a huge disadvantage for everybody. You talk about inner city kids. I mean, what things are they exposed to other than within their inner city?
Yeah.
They don't have the financials to get outside, and they don't have the sponsorship to go to some of these schools. I mean, some of the kids are brought in and they have sponsors. They'll get the parents a job or an apartment or something so that they can get the elite talent.
Yeah.
But the thing that I worry about in high school more than anything, and I know you said culling, you call in everything that you do in life, Charlton.
Yeah.
But when you take these kids and you make them stepping stones for other kids to go out and practice their skills, you got to look at the long-term effect over life it's gonna have on these kids.
I agree.
A lot of these kids have been injured playing against some of these dominant high school kids in these programs. No one ever talks about that, the injuries that they suffered, the broken arms, the torn knees, the concussions. Because you're playing and you're outmanned by these basic college kids that you're going up against.
At the high school level.
And so these are the things you have to look at. Is the totality of the damage on those kids that are not in those dominant programs.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. So we always will be conscious of that too. Tonight's Major League Baseball schedule: Cincinnati is at Pittsburgh, and these games are already underway. Tampa Bay at Baltimore, Atlanta at the New York Mets, Kansas City's at Cleveland, Philadelphia is at Miami. You have the Los Angeles Angels at Houston. That's a big search for Houston and Mike Trout. Arizona at Milwaukee. Texas is at Chicago, the White Sox. Detroit's at Minnesota. Colorado's at St. Louis. Boston is at San Diego. But the series that I can't wait to see is you have the New York Yankees at the LA Dodgers. That's a 7:10 p.m. start. James Paxton versus Hyun-Jin Ryu on the mound. And give me your thoughts. Is it too early to make a lot of noise about will these teams see each other again in the World Series? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I think the way that Major League Baseball stands right now is that nobody wants to go out and play a series in Chavez Ravine at Dodger Stadiums. The Dodgers right now, Charlton, on the season are 51-19 at home.
Wow.
They have been a dominant force when they get teams out there in Southern California.
Yeah.
So anybody who gets the Dodgers, and it seems this way, that the Dodgers are going to sure up winning the NL West and having the best record in Major League Baseball. So it's going to be very tough for any team to go out to Dodger Stadium and win a series. The best hope that anybody have if the Dodgers get to the World Series is that you got to go out there and get a split and hope to win them all at home.
Well, the Dodgers are looking good, and the Yankees were just swept by the Oakland A's. They were swept by Oakland up north, and now they're playing against a better team in Southern California. Toronto's at Seattle, and Washington's at Chicago. We'll close out with down in your neck of the woods, this beautiful golf tournament, the Tour Championship down there in Georgia. And you have Thomas, he's in the lead with -13. Koepka, he's -12. McIlroy's -10. And then Casey's -9, and it drops from there from Cantlay and Schauffele. And I want to get your feeling on, there's a lot happening in sports. You got so much barbecue that you can cook. You only have so many plates. You got people tuned into golf. You got people tuned into football on the college level, football on the NFL level, and I think we've mentioned that the Braves are down there too, Big C. Your thoughts on golf?
Well, the Braves are the top team in the National League East, Charlton. They've been dominant, but, the golf tournament going on there at Eastlake, Schauffele, had the lead going into the back nine yesterday, and he's been on a slide ever since, and he's in 5th place today, Charlton, so he's basically taken himself out of contention. But this is the golf tournament that everybody wants to play in, Charlton.
Yeah.
A $15 million grand prize for the winner of this Eastlake golf tournament. And, we all know the magic that Tiger brought to it last year. He's not a participant in it this year, nor is Phil there, nor is Jordan Spieth.
Yeah.
Former past winners of the FedEx Cup, Charlton. But, you know, the crowds are not what everybody expected because the big names in golf are not there. And so it affects golf just like any other sport, Charlton. You know, you talk about your quarterback friend out there in San Francisco, Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
You know, they expect for him to be there pulling the trigger, but you don't have a full house when he's not there. And that's how it is with any major sport across the country, Charlton. Stadiums and attendance suffer when your superstars are not in play.
Yeah, and when your superstar is going to protect his knee, he said, you already gave me the money. He's gotten guaranteed. It happens to a lot of players. When Derek Carr signed a $125 million contract, his performance fell off a little bit too, especially after he's broken his leg. It's just, they're human, and they want to survive, but it's all fair and love and war. We've talked about so many things. The start of college football again, kicking off very soon. Big C's Barbecue, inviting a lot of neighbors over. There's NFL football. A lot of guys are getting injured, and we haven't even kicked off from regular season. There's so much happening in the California. It's the fifth economy in the world. Pay attention to what's happening to the state capitol next week. And also, high school football. It starts with a bang tonight. I hope that everybody's safe. It's a great game, but you got to keep players safe also. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Bandini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in this sports universe?
Well, Charlton, sitting here on New Year's Eve, 2019, getting ready for college football tomorrow. What an exciting day. We're going to open up, you know, with the University of Miami at the University of Florida, down there in the House of the Mouse in Orlando. Then we're going to swing way out there to the West Coast, to the Hawaiian Islands, Charlton.
Oh, yeah.
Where the University of Hawaii will be kicking off the nightcap.
I love Hawaii. I wish I was still there. And you can be there, too, when you buy a ticket every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, that's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.